Boruto TBV Vortex Chapter 22 has just been released, and this chapter is absolute peak. I thought that we would have a little bit of a slower chapter after the 10 out of 10 chapter that we had in Chapter 21 with Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan Awakening, but Ikimoto has just cooked up another amazing chapter, and you'll find out my rating at the end of it. So let's first begin with the chapter cover, and the chapter cover is Boruto looking glorious. This is my, bro, I keep saying this every chapter, but could this be my favorite chapter cover that has been released just yet? I'm not gonna say it for this chapter, but this definitely is my favorite background, because I don't know exactly what Ikimoto is going for and is trying to foreshadow. I don't know why I keep having this feeling of seeing Boruto 2 of this idea of the singularity of fate, and how everything is drawn to the center where Boruto is. I'm really curious, how exactly does Ikimoto make these beautiful backgrounds? I really love seeing them. But here we have Boruto, the character who has the most new gen aura, the best drip, just like me and Boruto, we are quite alike, just some dripped out individuals. But jokes aside, Boruto looks amazing as usual. Obviously, yes, he did open up his chest. Why are you showing this? We are not Sarada. You should be doing this for Sarada exclusively. But I really love it here. Obviously, we know that with Ikimoto, he likes to change the color palettes for the outfits when he does it in covers. Sometimes it is the same as the original, and sometimes it is different. In this case, this may be a little bit different, as I didn't see this before. I do believe it is, but I really like the color scheme. I really wonder some of the outfits that Ikimoto pulls off, because the drip that he gives his characters is amazing in my opinion. But let's begin with the chapter. And this chapter starts off exactly where the first sneak peek did. We end up seeing the soul thorn in the air, with a Mitsuki who tells Ayara to go and collect the torn soul and give it to Shinki, while he ends up dealing with the claw grimes. It is at that moment where Mitsuki is formulating this plan that we see Jura pop in, and Jura pops in just from the claw grimes, like a lot of us have predicted. We see Jura looking elegant. Jura just keeps looking better and better every chapter. Ikimoto is just cooking, and Ayara is clearly scared, with a Mitsuki who is sweating, knowing that this is the boss of the divine trees. But Jura slightly looks at Sarada to see, oh shoot, she is a strong one, and we do get to hear a little bit more about Jura's personality, which will come to later on. But he notices Sarada at that instance. He gets a quick glance, and then he is straight to go and find Boruto. With a Boruto who we have discussed has just dealt with Matsuri, and I want to make this point very clear. We do have a lot of hate that goes to the Senju apart from Jura, saying that they are weak and not as strong as we thought, but Boruto says this and makes it quite clear that he was only able to deal with Matsuri so easily and quite quick because she was already beat up. He says that otherwise it wouldn't have been this easy, just proving the fact that not only in this arc it was the main point of catching them off guard, but also Boruto being able to defeat her this quick is due to the fact that she was already beaten up by the Rasengan that Konohamaru had done. And I did have the question of whether her soul thorn bulb would end up appearing, as it didn't seem like those pieces had turned to ash, but it did end up turning to ash, and then we see a soul thorn that ends up appearing. Jura attempts to snipe Boruto from quite a distance, but he ends up missing. And I feel like it is quite intentional that we're seeing Jura miss, as it may also be the reason why we're seeing the Senju not being shown to be that strong, as they were literally born not too long ago. And due to that, although they have the genetics and these crazy powers, they are not familiar with those abilities. They may have that innate experience, but they are not experienced with that experience, if you get what I'm trying to say. So in this case, we're going to gradually see the Senju grow stronger with the more and more they end up using those abilities. But that's why Sasuke was able to use the Chidori, but didn't really understand the mechanics behind it, as he didn't actually use those abilities and go through the training and experience necessary for him to truly understand it. And this is what we could be seeing here with all of the different Senju. But now that the torn soul bulb has been obtained, we have a Boruto who is telling Konohamaru to run away. And Konohamaru, who is acting a little bit dense, you know that Konohamaru isn't the smartest guy out there, alongside characters like Code. Yes, Konohamaru, I'm putting you alongside another L character because both of you guys are L's, but I prefer Code a little bit more. But Due to Konohama acting a little bit slow, we have a Boruto who ends up grabbing Konohama to run away from Jura, who is using a Bijudama. Boruto ends up grabbing Konohama, flies in the air, and throws Konohama away after they have escaped from the attack. It is kind of funny how we have Boruto, who is, I believe, 15 at this moment, throwing his sensei around like he's a bag of rice or sand, and Boruto really doesn't care. Konohama can't say too much. At least Konohama didn't go crashing down. At least he was able to go on his foot, you feel me, land with a little bit of aura and swagger. However, Konohama is just an L in my opinion. I'm sorry, I can't rock with Konohama. But we continue with a Boruto who is now trying to get the attention of Jura by using the Rasengan. He had already placed a bunch of different kunais for his teleportation, and now we're seeing the confrontation of Boruto versus Jura, and these panels just look epic. Make sure that you do also try and see it in this horizontal format. You could do that on Manga Plus just by checking the settings, but it's the best way to view it, as it feels like you're viewing it from a book perspective. But we see a Boruto who uses the Flying Raijin multiple times to end up escaping Jura and his attacks, with a Jura who ends up noting that in the panels to come, and Jura keeps looking more elegant as we see him in the chapters. I really like the way Jura looks, in my opinion, and one thing that is quite funny that I didn't notice at first until it was pointed out to me by some of you guys in the comment section below is that when Jura was blocking Boruto's attack with his finger, he actually blocked it with his middle finger, which gives it even more aura, in my opinion. It makes it even funnier that Jura is kind of disrespecting Boruto by using his middle finger. It's just something I wanted to point out. But now we go back to some critical piece of information, and it is about whether Boruto really has a chance. And from somebody like Ada and her perspective, it seems like Boruto is actually holding his own, and Boruto could potentially even win this fight or escape it unscathed. But Kashin Koji has a different opinion. He believes that there is no way that he can win, not with the current sequences of events. So this basically tells us that there was a sequence of events that Kashin Koji wanted Boruto to take, where Boruto would then be able to defeat Jura. With different translations that have come out and that I have read, it does end up saying that maybe with a little bit more years. It does talk about years where Boruto would then be able to face Jura. So this is clearly not the moment for Boruto to end up facing Jura. However, he did, and in doing so, we have a Kashin Koji who looks down. Look, he looks depressed, in my opinion. I really haven't seen Kashin Koji smile at all, but now I can barely even see his eyes. Kashin Koji is clearly going through it, and he thinks that this is the destruction of the verse right now, the Boruto verse as it seems, as Jura is simply that guy. And this chapter, as we're going to continue reading it, it reminds me a lot of the chapter where Jigen ended up using True Essence Karma, where we literally saw every move that they use simply not work. But we're gonna get to that as we're literally starting to see in this chapter. But one of the main reasons that have been pointing out recently, and is pointed out by Kashin Koji here, is the fact that we cannot see Boruto escape. Not only simply because of the point that I've mentioned, the fact that if Boruto ends up leaving, due to the fact that Jura has realized that he has some love for those people like Konohama, Sarada, all the people that ended up fighting the Senju, and thus he doesn't want them to die, Jura could end up going to his friends and those people that he loves and use it as a way to draw out Boruto. But that's not the only problem. Due to Boruto's Flying Raijin not being the best, he will struggle to even be able to find those targets that he has placed in Kashin Koji's hideout. Because he is fighting versus Jura, it will take a lot of concentration for him to be able to do so, and with that concentration, he cannot obtain it while fighting Jura, which basically means that Boruto is doomed. And Kashin Koji says to Boruto that he should have known that, and yet he is still fighting. So on his side, Boruto is done for without a doubt. And this is the same sentiment that we have Jura talk about. The fact that Boruto should probably know that there is no chance in him winning, and he knows that Jura came here to kill him. But Jura wants to get more information about how Boruto knows so much about the Senju due to the fact that they have recently emerged. But Boruto doesn't leak any sort of information about Kashin Koji, with a Boruto who is trying to figure out just how he'll be able to defeat Jura, and he deduces that he'll be able to do so with the the Uzuhiko. Now Jura ends up talking about love, and in this love, he is talking about the fact that he has recently come to the understanding and has seen love, but in his opinion, love is simply a weakness for humans, and it doesn't lead to anything but death, as Boruto ended up coming here because of the love he has for his friends, and thus was to save them, but it has caused and will lead to his death. Now Boruto, who isn't paying too much attention to Jura's words, he is trying to figure out a way in which he is going to be able to use his Uzuhiko. And this is what he's trying to do, as he is evading all those different wood styles that Jura is using, as he needs to touch the ground in order to be able to use that ability. And due to all the commotion that is going on, Boruto's sword that Sasuke gave him ends up falling in the sand, with a Jura who ends up grabbing a hold of that, and Boruto who tells Jura that if he does anything to his sword that he borrowed from his master, that he'll face a fate worse than death. Boruto, you my guy, but in your current condition, I don't know if you should be saying that. But let's continue with a Jura who ends up noting again, oh, this is because of love that he is able to do so. And with that, Jura poses a very intriguing question to Boruto, that he's like, yo, just let me know who your accomplice is and I won't destroy this sword, but I'll still end up killing you. What would be quite interesting is that Boruto goes in a full Kurama rage mode where he ends up, after Jura ends up breaking the sword. That would be quite funny to see, and it could be something that is hinting at happening in the future, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be a Kurama, probably a Borishiki, or probably his own Otsutsuki powers, where he ends up tapping into his karma. There are multiple different possibilities, but in that instance, he does end up asking Boruto again, what is this love? Because in his opinion, love is a flaw and a weakness of humans. But Boruto says something quite intriguing, and I love that it is not something that is not necessarily too deep, but is deep in the way that Boruto says it. Because Boruto says, it is my opinion, but that is precisely why you will never be more than just a tree. Because they can't understand this concept of love, they are not going to be these conscious human beings. They are still going to remain trees due to the fact that they can't understand love. This is what is separating the Senju from humans, as they are incapable of understanding this feeling of love, or at least Jura, who only sees the negative. But it is with this that Boruto musters up his Uzuhiko, escaping from the wood, and he does end up hitting Jura with it. And in my opinion, before I even saw anything, I was like, okay, this is where we're going to see the very intriguing moment. We're going to learn more about the Uzuhiko. Maybe Jura might be cooked right here. But what actually ends up happening is quite interesting. Boruto, just like he did to Code, he's feeling this aura. He's putting his sword back in his sheath. He's like, yeah, I just took care of Jura. I really am that guy. Kashin Koji, what were you talking about, bro? I don't need anybody's help to be able to deal with all of these Senju. I can take care of it by myself. As he ends up telling Jura, the world seems to be spinning, right? Your sense of equilibrium is mucked. You won't be able to fly anymore. I bet you're even struggling to stand. And we see a Jura who is on his knees. Pause. But he ends up doing something that is quite interesting. And this is why I kept saying that this fight reminds me of Sasuke and Naruto versus Jigen, where no matter what move they end up using, it would simply be a waste of chakra, Amaterasu, all those crazy abilities, Susanoo, Kurama Link Mode, all these abilities that they ended up using were futile. But in this case, in my opinion, it's a little worse and a little bit more disrespectful. This power, he says, is quite similar to the Bijou Bomb. He ends up touching himself in the chest or in some of those areas around that part of his body, and then he completely nullifies the Uzuhiko. And he says that it is because it follows similar principles to the Bijou Bomb, and hence I was able to nullify it. And we have a Boruto who says, damn, the Uzuhiko doesn't work on him. And this is the part where we are left at, where the chapter ends up ending. And this chapter is absolutely peak. But let's first discuss what we're seeing. What we're seeing right here is that Ikimoto clearly trying to show to us that Boruto, at least in his base, is no match for Jura. And if we really thought as an audience that, oh yes, Boruto, he has been glazed throughout the time skip, he has been this guy with the most aura, but there are still limitations of his power. And that power limitation lies in Jura, who is the strongest person that we have seen in the verse so far. He is that guy. And with what is being shown, we're seeing exactly where Boruto's strength lies. He is underneath the likes of Jura. And with that being shown to us by him using his strongest move, not necessarily all of his abilities, we don't see him use the Vanishing Rasengan, we don't see him use the Purple Lightning, but we did see him use the most broken ability that we have seen in the Boruto verse so far, the Uzuhiko, that allowed him to take care of both Cold when it wasn't even at full power, and also Hidari when it was at full power, when it was close to full power, but yet when he uses it against Jira, although it isn't at full power, even the properties that would make it a lot easier for Boruto to end up defeating Jura, those centrifugal forces that would lead to him not having enough balance, even with those effects at play, it still wasn't enough for him to be able to deal with Jura. And one thing that is quite interesting to note is Jura's personality that we do see. He says in part of the chapter is that he feels amazing and something bubbling inside of him when he is getting to fight strong opponents. And we also saw this with the likes of Himawari, and we also saw that Jura glanced at Sarada. Jura has noticed some of the strongest people in the verse so far, and those have been Himawari, who he has been interested in due to how strong she is, Boruto, and also Sarada, that he has paid a close attention to by giving her a little bit of a glance when he ended up watching everything that took place from Ryu's perspective, and also with Matsuri. Clearly, he wouldn't look at Konohamaru as Konohamaru is weak. He did give a quick glance at Konohamaru, I won't deny that, but I believe it was simply due to the fact that he was running away. And one person that he didn't give that glance and appreciation to, obviously Kawaki. Obviously Kawaki doesn't have that level of strength at the current moment, and it makes sense in my opinion. But what's gonna happen with Kawaki? What are the next ways in which Boruto can act? This will definitely be discussed about in those future theory videos. I'm going to be uploading quite consistently this month and the months to come, as I am in my summer break right now, so I'm going to be enjoying it in the fullest with you guys. So if you guys have any thoughts, comments, and concerns, you probably saw that I posted a Blue Lock video. If you mess with Blue Lock, definitely go and watch it. But this chapter is a 9.5 to me, 9 around that area. I would give it a higher rating, but I know that the next chapter is going to be even better. And we're in that moment where Ikimoto has established all those little hints that he wanted to, and now we're going to be reaching a point where it is the climax of this arc, in my personal opinion, which is the climax of this arc, not necessarily the saga, the ending part of the saga, or the climax of the saga itself. I believe it would happen when both Boruto and Kawaki end up fighting Jura, when it is actually meant for them to fight him. But for the moment, we're reaching a climax of this arc, which could ultimately then lead to a success of the Senju in some way if Boruto is defeated. But we'll talk about that in videos to come. For the moment, let's just enjoy this chapter. So let me know your thoughts, comments, and concerns in the comment section below. Make sure to like and subscribe. It's been your boy Dynasty, and I'm out, bruh.